We're now joined by Martin Armstrong, the legendary economist and founder of Armstrong Economics, whose predictive models have stunned governments, Wall Street, and analysts around the world for decades. When Martin talks, people listen because his computer model, Socrates, has predicted everything from financial crashes to geopolitical upheavals with eerie precision. And now he's sounding the alarm. In a chilling new piece, he writes, while the neocons look only at their immediate objective, they are incapable of ever comprehending the unintended consequences. This is not the end, but the beginning, and that's not just my opinion, that's what the computer says. I wish it were just my opinion because then maybe, just maybe, we'd have a shot at being wrong. Martin says a panic cycle is coming in 2026, international war, and the data says it's not a question of if, but when. Martin, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Well, I don't know if I want to get the bad news, but I think we need to get the bad news. So what is this you're talking about in this piece of this? So you're saying full-on war. I mean, I think a lot of us are hoping that things would calm down, that the strikes will stop, that at some point it's like, okay, you guys all did what you were going to do, and now let's just like call it over in peace. A lot of us thought that would happen with Russia and Ukraine. In fact, we thought that it would only last a couple of weeks, and now we're a couple of years into that war. 3 years. How deep are we into that one now? I think we're in the third year of that war. Yeah. So that was unexpected. So what do you see? What do you see for our future, Martin?
Unfortunately, the computer's been projecting. I mean, in 2011, I stood up in our conference and, I showed the audience, I said, okay, fine, war cycle turns up in 2014. Even a year in advance, I said it's highlighting Ukraine. It's been incredible on so many things. I mean, the collapse of Russia, 98, and just go down the list. But it's done the elections. Nigel Farage came and spoke at our 2019 conference. He said, of course I'm here. He's the only one that said I would win. Every newspaper said Brexit would lose, this is what's happened. Mainstream media, I think, has become so corrupt in the sense that these polls are more just trying to say, see, everybody's going to vote here, so you better do it too. Mm-hmm. It's not really polls anymore. Everything's just political minutia. And our computer's been projecting that we're heading into war. Most likely it's going to start picking up a lot more aggressively next year. I've seen, look, we've published our models and they go out for years. I've never seen it do a panic cycle on a yearly basis on our war models, really since World War II. And
what's a panic cycle? Explain that.
In markets, it's kind of like you take out the low, you suddenly turn around and you take out the high. You take out both sides. It's highly volatile. So we have to understand I know some of these neocons. I know Bill Kristol even spoke at one of our conferences back in the 90s. And it's just their thinking process. And in all honesty, I don't see any difference between them and the terrorists on the other side. The objects are different, okay, but what I mean is that both simply believe in whatever their agenda is, and they're not going to change. And I argued with Kristol back then. In the 90s, he was saying we had to take out Saddam Hussein, Assad out of Syria, and Gaddafi, and then we'll bring peace to the Middle East. I said, you're out of your mind. They don't see themselves as Syrian. They see themselves as Sunni, Shiite, Kurd, very tribal in a way. The same thing in Eastern Europe. These people, we had two employees from Ukraine, one from Kiev, one from Donetsk. They wouldn't even talk to each other. We had a conference in Greece, and the one from Kiev refused to fly back home because the quickest way, because the plane stopped in Moscow. They're just seated hatreds there that you're not going to get. Like Czechoslovakia, when it broke up, Czech Republic, Slovakia. They're ethnic differences. Yugoslavia broke up. All right, you had Serbians and Croatia and Albanians. They just remember all these things, and it goes on for years. I mean, it's not like here in the United States. Like, they still call Catholics papes in Britain, and that was from the Civil War, 1649. And Ireland's still separated. I've been to Bavaria, and they say tomorrow's a holiday. I said, what's that? A holiday? Oh, we won the war. I said, which one? No, we beat Prussia. It's Protestant versus Catholic. This here in the Middle East, thinking that they can just, I think they snookered Trump into this, thinking that, okay, fine, we just do this, they take that out and one shot, and then we'll end it. Never going to happen. This is a religious issue. This is Sunni versus Shiite as well. All right. The difference for people who don't understand is more like the Ayatollah, the Shiites it's like church versus the state. So the church should run the state. So if you're delving into religious issues, then at the same time, these neocons have been waging wars. They claim that, Russia wants to conquer the world. Well, they do too. You can read, go on YouTube and watch Robert McNamara's apology before he died, about Vietnam. Gee, sorry, we were wrong. We thought Russia was involved. It's always been Russia, Russia, Russia. So, that's why if I was Putin, why would I agree to a peace deal? I had a client that was there at the Vienna Peace Conference a couple of months ago, and he called. He says, "This has nothing to do with peace anymore. Everybody's talking about putting in drafts, preparing for war. You get war historically when governments are in trouble, and that's the real issue here." If you look at Netanyahu, there was a no confidence vote the day before. He won only by 2 votes. Okay. Knowing these neocons as I do, because like I said, I've been to dinner with some of them, it was now or never. Because if he lost power, then they would lose that ability to do this. I think Trump got rid of a lot of the neocons that were in the administrations, like John Bolton, Victoria Nuland. I think Bolton would invade Canada to get to Russians, but you have all this, really going on, and I think they managed to get Netanyahu, who is a dyed-in-the-wool neocon. He went to school in Philadelphia. He hung out with Bill Kristol and his family, and as Bill Kristol's father is the one that started the neocon movement. Now, I know Bill. He even spoke at one of our conferences. So it's... I think Trump got snookered into this thing and thinking that one shot and it's over with, but it's not. Our computer's showing that, fine, you got a little bit of a lull right now, but this is coming back, and basically from August on into 2027. And now, you have Zelensky over there, demanding, if he's not let into NATO, then he's going to get nuclear weapons too. Um, it's not, these things are not resolvable. The hatred is just too entrenched. And, what the press doesn't really talk a lot about is that 80% of the oil from Iran goes to China. And China built a railway. I think it was finished in 2016 or so. So that's their Silk Road. So in theory, Iran could shut down the Strait of Hormuz and it wouldn't hurt them. It would hurt everybody else. But, I don't think that they really can, because then they're going to be creating enemies with the Sunnis, etc., Saudi Arabia, UAE. But, I mean, we're going into World War III. I mean, unfortunately, our neocons, they look at us as stupid imbeciles. They just tell us whatever they want us to hear and believe. And they do their own agenda. So our computer shows it's going to start picking up in August. November, also getting a little bit more volatile. And off into 26. But we're not looking at this thing really peaking out until probably around 2027.
2027 is when you say peak out, like, do you mean like that's the height of the war and then it starts to trickle down after 2027?
Maybe, yeah. I think you're going to be looking at, look, at this stage in the game, China understands that Russia's war is not with Ukraine, it's with NATO. You even had Boris Johnson coming out, even made the front pages of Scandinavian newspapers. He's openly said, we're in a proxy war with Russia. Mm-hmm. So he's basically declared war. Britain has declared war on Russia. China will join Russia. If they don't, they know they're next in line. Simple as that. I mean, I don't know what to say. The neocons, when they were vehemently against Trump winning, you had Dick Cheney even coming out endorsing Camilla. And really at that stage in the game, they moved to Europe. And NATO is just a retirement home for neocons. That's it. There isn't one of them there that, even speaks about peace. And the rule book, number one for neocons, is never allow anybody to talk to your adversary, because there might be a peace deal. So if you understand that, and I was in D.C., back when, Gorbachev hinted that maybe he'd want to talk and Reagan wanted to go meet with him. And they were saying they couldn't call him a communist anymore. So they said, oh, well, you can never trust a Russian. It's always this same agenda. And if you look at Europe, every leader refuses to talk to Putin. As long as you don't talk, then there's no shot of a peace deal. That's why they were all quite mad at Trump going over and talking to him. Mm-hmm. And, you had Kalis coming out, who was the former PM of Estonia, and she came out, I don't care what he agrees to, we're not going to accept it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is, you just have tremendous hatreds over there. And I don't see this as like a negotiation. All right, fine, I'll give you this territory, you give me that, sort of thing. We're beyond that. So it's our computer, and this is not my opinion. I mean, I don't want to see this any more than anybody else. But, it's gotten more attention over the years than I had anticipated, and this is it's forecast, and it has not been wrong. I mean, if it was my opinion, we got to at least a 50-50 shot that I could be wrong,
Okay.
But
So the computer says we're going into full-on World War III. That's what it's saying. It's not just a regional war or a limited war, but it's a full-on World War III.
yes, because Ukraine and Iran are both connected. The neocons are behind both.
Right. Okay. So does your computer tell us which countries are on which side? Like, are you able to predict based on looking at the different data that this country is likely involved? There's an allied, these are a group and this is a group and they're going at it with each other. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, pretty much. It's, that's how the computer was able to pinpoint Ukraine more than a year in advance. There's certain areas that are prone to conflicts. Most people don't realize, but there's so many wars have been fought over Crimea since the days of Roman Emperor Nero.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, Ukraine is where the Black Death came from. And I mean, this, you talk about the Donbass are primarily, they're Russians. They're not Ukrainians. All right. Even Brezhnev was born there. All right. If you look at Crimea, 15% of the population is still Tatars. That's from the Mongol invasion of 1240. They just did like, but they're the ones also that brought the Black Plague from Asia. Mm-hmm. And to win, they started catapulting dead bodies into the forts, and the Italians got scared. They fled to Italy, and they brought the plague right back to Europe. It killed a third of the population. So Crimea has been kind of a center point for many things for more than 1,000 years.
So, do you see in the economic in Socrates in the forecast for World War III? Do you see, is it like Iran, Russia, China versus United States and NATO and Israel?
Yes, pretty much. It's look, Iran. What I mean that these people never consider beyond the end of their nose. They took out Iraq, and I actually heard them say, we got away with it, nobody interfered. They were wondering if Russia would interfere to defend Iraq. They didn't. Mm-hmm. And I was told, and I think even General Wesley Clark has come out, and you can watch his thing on YouTube as well. I think in 2007 he came out with, he went to the Pentagon and found out the same thing. They said, we're going into Iraq. He asked, have you connected Iraq to 9/11? No. Right. And they told him that he was they were going to go in and then take out, conquer 7 countries in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And exactly what I heard from Kristol back in the 90s. And so the Middle East is divided. I mean, you have Sunni versus Shiite. But, the real danger here is that it's being perceived more religious. And then you activate sleeper cells in the United States and Europe. Our computers showing, civil unrest in most of the major cities of Europe as a result of this. They were able to take out Iraq and never considered what would happen if you did remove Saddam. You can also look on YouTube at Tony Blair's apology. He said, we thought we were freeing the people. We were wrong. We subjected them to a lot more, sectarian violence. You had people, ISIS beheading people and stuff. They don't look at, we just have to take down Iran. What comes after that?
Right.
There's no strategic plan here.
Yeah. So when you look at this model, does it tell you who wins?
Unfortunately, eventually after 2032, China will emerge as the major financial center of the world. Um, what's happening here is simultaneously we're in this phase where we have Republican governments, and they are really the most corrupt form possible. Um, Mainly, look, like I said, I could run for Congress. I'll tell you whatever you want to hear. I get there, and then I say, "Good, glad you're here. Now here's how it works." Um, the decisions are made in the back room, and just look at the votes. They're always generally down party line. So, I can say, vote for me, I'll save the whales, or I'll say whatever you want me to say. But when I get there, that's not the way I'm allowed to vote.
Right.
And if you
right.
don't, you're kicked off of committees. So what our computer's showing, this is kind of like what 2032 to us is the culmination of several hundred years. And we go through these upheavals politically to reestablish different forms of government. Um, for example, you had in 509 BC, you had Rome overthrow its king and created the Roman Republic. Within a few months, Athens goes, gee, that's a good idea. They overthrow their tyrants, and democracy's born. These things are always contagious. American Revolution. Washington sworn in 1789. The French go, that's a good idea. French Revolution. Tiananmen Square happens. Berlin Wall falls within, a couple of months. So these things historically are always contagious. You had a French Revolution in 1848. Everybody said that's a good idea, and it swept throughout Europe. This one is basically the end of republics. I would like to see it where we get more towards a real direct democracy, where we actually have a right to vote on something. I mean, they tell us we live in a democracy, which is nothing but propaganda.
Right.
Like Vietnam, you're 18, you're old enough to get a gun and go kill somebody. You weren't old enough to have a drink or to vote.
Right.
That's democracy. So it's getting, we're looking at this as the culmination, and a lot of people, you see it with people getting frustrated with mainstream media. So we saw it with COVID, that, okay, the First Amendment says the government shall not interfere with First Amendment. Didn't stop them from picking up the phone and telling, hey, YouTube, cut this person. That's okay. And you have free speech under major attack in Europe. This is when governments know they're losing power. They become more authoritarian. And what I said about Netanyahu, he either goes now or risks losing the position. Okay, his polls were down to about 29%. So this was, and what I could see is that this was a desperate attempt by the Neocons while they still had him in power. I mean, it was really about regime change. I mean, they knew they couldn't take out the nukes. So you're going after them because they're nuclear. But you went to decapitate basically the government. And you take out this Ayatollah, and you're going to probably make him a religious martyr. Then what do you get? It just gets much more complicated. So I don't like what our computer's showing, but look, this is reality. We're looking at, people are rising up against government everywhere. You look at Europe, In Germany, they wanted to ban the AfD. Oh, they're a bunch of Nazis. Now they're number one party. Poland, same thing, goes to the right. You got Nigel Farage's Reform Party, now number one. The people are beginning to realize that they're being lied to, manipulated. Just look at Europe. I mean, I know Klaus Schwab. Everybody that was there to set it up came from his board. Ursula, she hasn't even stood for election to be a dog catcher. She's never stood for an election.
Yeah.
So people are just getting very frustrated with this, and I think that's where you're seeing the shift politically. And unfortunately, when that also happens, governments get more authoritarian and desperate.
Right.
So that's how they retain power. So if they, I don't know what you've heard, but I've heard that it's more in Iran starting to get people to more or less starting to coalesce that they're supporting the government rather than against it.
Right.
And this is what the neocons don't get, because they're judging people by themselves. And they put the sanctions on Russia, thinking, okay, fine, the Russian people will get angry, they'll overthrow Putin, and they win. Doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. They know who's doing it, right? And the same thing you're seeing, I think, in Iran. It brings them together. It doesn't, separate them.
Yeah.
When you're the public, adversary, it's one thing if you did it covertly and you made them think that Putin was doing it. Okay. But when you're out there boasting that you're going to, do this, they tend to support Putin. And you're going to see the same thing, I think, in Iran. And that's my concern, that it will spread because of this is to be perceived more as a holy war. Therein lies the danger.
So what does this mean for us Americans in America? What is the economic, if we're going into full-on war and China ultimately emerges as the global new world power by 2032, what does it mean? Like economically, are we going to feel a lot of pain between now and then? Are we going to see, what do you see for us, like on the daily life of an American?
Well, our computer turned down in May of last year. So we're going into a recession, which won't bottom until 2028. But it's going to be more of a stagflation type thing. So the prices of things tend to rise, mainly because of shortages, things of this nature. Mm-hmm. All right, which is typical, particularly in war. All right, but the economic growth's not going to be there. Some of the things that are very disturbing to me, and I actually just sent a letter to the White House and to a number of people on Capitol Hill. What I want taken out is that provision they put in the big beautiful bill, 5% tax on any foreigner transmitting money out of the United States. I understand. Okay, you're going after the migrants. However, they don't understand the world economy. All right, I'm going to have to tell clients not to invest in the United States because besides the income tax you'd have to pay here on your earnings, then they want 5% to sell and get out. Mm-hmm. Some bureaucrat is not going to distinguish between a migrant and a major institution investing. And I can't tell you how many times I've been called in by governments over the last 40 years, and they all make the same stupid mistake. And this goes back to 85. They stood up with the G5. Oh, we're going to lower the value of the dollar by 40% so we can sell more widgets overseas. I warned them they're going to create a crash. Oh, why? I said, because you sold a third of national debt to Japan, and they're going to sell because they're going to lose 40%. Really? That's the 87 crash. They've done this every single time. And my conclusion in working with governments for so long, as a child, you probably stuck your finger in the flame of a candle, even though your parents said no. You're not going to do it again because you now know it hurts. Government doesn't have that ability to retain experience.
Yeah.
Because it's the next administration and they come up with the same crazy idea as the other one. Trump ran for election to end endless wars.
Yeah. Only to get us into one.
Yeah, he's getting us into one. He doesn't realize it. But
and you're saying he's getting us into the worst one, World War III.
Yes. Look, this was already set in motion by the Biden administration with Ukraine. And Zelensky, look, he maintains, martial law because, like I said, I've had, employees there. Most people don't believe he even won the election to begin with. But if he did have an election, he wouldn't win. So that's why he declares martial law. His former PR guy is fled. I think he's in New Zealand. And he says if there's ever elections, he'll run against Zelensky and he'll put him and his crew in jail. But, this is what we're dealing with. It's nothing but corruption, lies. You have, the poll on Netanyahu was at only at 29%. So it's not even all the Israelis are behind this.
Right.
I just put out a report on how governments are overthrown. And because I was up in Alberta and they were talking about separating from Canada. And so I did all the research on it and I was surprised. It only takes about most of your revolutions occur with less than 15% of the population. But they're the hardliners, they're the zealots, and they push it. Majority is kind of like we see in other issues. It's like, oh, well, okay, fine. And they just go along with the flow. They remain silent, the silent majority. So it doesn't look good. We're going into this recession. Trump's tariffs will probably be blamed, but that's not the issue. Europe looks like it's more into a depression. And with Europe, I can tell you that, as you know, I was the one that they came to when they were creating the euro. And I said, look, okay, fine, this is how we create a currency. You have to consolidate the debt. And Helmut Kohl was the chancellor at the time of Germany, and he didn't allow the German people to vote to go into the euro. He knew he would lose 7-3. So he took Germany in. They created the euro against the will of the people. And he insisted no consolidation of the debt. And I warned them, and this is why Europe's falling apart. I said, you'll never compete with the dollar. It's more or less like just looking at the states. All right, we have, same currency. You got 50 states and they all have different credit ratings. All right, if I'm a fund manager, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion worth of treasuries. I can't do that with Europe. I still have to say, gee, do I want Germany? Do I want France? It was never consolidated. That's why the euro could never compete against the dollar. And this is what's tearing it apart. They're not all paying the same interest rates. You can look at all the peripheral rates in Europe and pitting one against the other. And the problem here is we saw the first inkling of it in 2010 when Greece got into trouble. What happened? It sets off a contagion. All right. And that contagion, the traders go, oh, who's next? Oh, Spain. Let's go after that. Whereas in the U.S., you don't get that federally. If California went bust, they go, okay, who's next? Oh, Washington. All right. Whereas in Europe, one EU country goes down, it's a contagion, takes the whole thing down. This is why they're pushing for war. I was speaking with people who were in meetings in Brussels, and they called and they asked me why Germany was pushing so hard for war. I said, because Germany's the one that's in serious trouble. First, they had the COVID nonsense. Then you had the climate change. Then they put sanctions on Russia. All right. So it's kind of like, I shoot myself in the foot to show you I'm serious. And if you don't back off, I'll shoot you in the foot.
Right.
So their economy has actually shrunk by 3%. And I'm not talking about recession. I'm talking about the number of possible jobs. You wiped out a lot of small businesses. And Germany is the cornerstone of the EU. It's 25% of the GDP. You saw massive protests from Volkswagen.
Yeah.
Because then they tell their people, oh, you can't produce gas cars. It's going to have to be electric. Oh, we're going to have to lay off tens of thousands of people. Oh, well, we have to save the planet. Economically, this is not going well. Yes, we're going into a steep recession. It will be more of a depression in Europe for the reasons I'm laying out. And that increases the risk of war because then they would need war as a distraction to retain power.
Okay. Well, let's hope we survive. I guess that's the hope and message, right? I hope we can survive. Martin, thank you so much for. Okay, that's good. That's good. It's going to be a little painful, it sounds like, going through a bit of a recession. But maybe, like I said, I hope that the silver lining of this is if we lose a giant war and other countries emerge as stronger, then perhaps, maybe it'll just finally do away with this neocon agenda and we can instead start focusing on building our country, making America great again, and actually focusing on an America First agenda. That would be the hope. So, Martin, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us, what are people going to get from martineconomics.com? From armstrongeconomics.com.
It's an open site. We don't sell advertising. You don't have to put in your email. We're actually, I was told, we're the only ones that are not blocked worldwide because everybody knows it's the computer. So I guess we're the last bastion of free speech, I suppose. I don't really know. But when we do our conferences, they're streamed in 37 countries, including even Russia and China.
Wow.
I don't know. We'll see how long that lasts. Maybe next year it doesn't. I don't know. But we try to keep it as an open source so everybody can access it, and you don't have to put in your email and get 50 emails and saying, hey, you want to buy some swampland in Florida or something.
All right, Martin. Well, we do have that link down below. And also, are you on X? Let me see here. Do we have your X profile?
I think.
Oh, yeah,
yes,
we do. Yes. You're also, that link is also down below. We do have your Armstrong Economics X link there if people want to follow you on X. Martin, thank you again for being here. Thank you for giving us the doomsday forecast, but at least, it's better to know than to not, right? It's better to know what we're getting into. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and I look forward to talking to you again and hoping that maybe the forecast changes. I don't know, maybe they'll get it together.
The light at the end of the tunnel is that we get finally to revise government.
Yeah, okay.
It's like, all right, fine, there was a revolutionary war against monarchy. and then the founding fathers got together and created what we have. All right, so
Right.
history, you always see these major political changes.
Yeah.
This is what we're going through. Hopefully, this time we go more towards a direct democracy than a republic, where we actually get to vote.
Yeah.
Do we go to war? Yes or no? And not
Right.
some neocon in the back room lying to us to get us into it.
Yeah. That would be nice. That would be nice. Martin, once again, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Take care.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.